10 men in 103 minutes. That's fast work. That was John C. Woods. My name is Kevin, and this is History Goon. What is going on, everybody? Wow. Back at it again. Almost feels like I didn't stop recording from the last episode. It's only been 4 hours in between. But I was off. I've been off today from work, and I'm off tomorrow. So I've got a couple more episodes. I might record another one either tonight or tomorrow. I haven't decided yet. But again, if I sound different, I'm trying to get my eyes fixed somewhere in my glasses again because the screen hurts because I'm old. I should just get some blue light blockers, probably be a good idea, but these are like prescriptions, so may as well just wear them because I'm supposed to and all that, You need to be able to see, whatever, you fucking dork. Seeing is for losers. Anyway, throughout time, we as a species have come up with all kinds of creative and disturbing ways to kill each other for some reasonable and some exceptionally dumb reasons. What we're talking about this week is when executions don't go the way that they're supposed to and end in horrifying and sometimes hilarious ways. Our first story is that of Margaret Pole, the Countess of Salisbury. I'm not going into the entire royal bloodline thing because it's way too complicated and convoluted for now. Just let it be known she's probably some type of lizard because that's just how the royal family works. Either way, she's the only surviving, for now, daughter of George Plantagenet and the niece of Edward V. IV. And the niece of Edward IV and Richard III. She's arrested in November of 1538 for her involvement in the Exeter conspiracy, which is some flowery royal bullshit plan to overthrow Henry VIII and replace him with Henry Courtenay, who was the first Marquis of Exeter. I'm not going to pretend to understand any of what I just said. As far as I'm concerned, as an American, I haven't had to worry about what the British royalty has cared about in quite some time. I know people are obsessed with, oh my God, the royal wedding, or the Queen died and they've got a new one. I don't care what pedophile they put a crown on. It doesn't matter to me. They're all related anyway. They always have been. The English, the ones in Germany, and the ones that were in Russia, they're all related. It doesn't matter. Then eventually we'll talk about the Habsburgs and the chin that's named after them. That thing is amazing. Oh my God, the Habsburg chin is it's like a cryptid almost. You see it and you're like, wait, what? That's not real. That can't be real. And oh man, it really is. Anyway, enough talking about inbred royals and back to talking about inbred royals. On the morning of May 27th, 1541, the guards arrived at her cell and told her she would be dead within an hour. And they found a poem scrawled on the wall. Now, they don't say exactly what the poem was scrawled on the wall with. So we'll leave it up to the imagination what writing medium she used. I don't know that she would have been given a quill and ink. I'm also not saying that she's possibly a poet, but there's potential for it. Anyway, here's this masterpiece in poetry. For traitors on the block should die. I am no traitor, no, not I. My faithfulness stands fast, and so towards the block I shall not go, nor make one step, as you shall see. Christ, in thy mercy, save thou me. Unfortunately, the big guy's voicemail box was full, so she couldn't leave a message. Anyway, they dragged her from her cell in the Tower of London and down to the scaffold, and unfortunately, since she's a member of royalty, her execution was not carried out in front of the public. We'll get into a little bit more of that here shortly. There are two written accounts of her execution, one from the French ambassador and one from the ambassador from the Holy Roman Empire. And they told about the same story, except one told a little bit more about the trouble that she gave the executioners. Apparently, this crusty old decided that when they laid her down to meet the axe, it was probably the best policy to thrash around and scream like a 5-year-old that doesn't want to take a nap. And she's screaming, "So should traitors do, and I am none." He did try to, plan to kill the king. So, let's do a quick ADD break to get an actual definition of what a traitor is. Oh, wow, look at that. She's literally the textbook definition of a traitor. Traitor, a person who betrays a friend, country, principle, etc. Oh, weird. So, your stupid poem was completely unnecessary. Sorry. You are a traitor, loser. The headsman raised the axe in front of the 150 onlookers, all of which were highborn, and drops the steel. He raises it again and slams it down again and again and again. With her flopping around and making everyone's life difficult, it took 11 strokes of the axe to kill her. Not clean, not quick, not painless. The axeman didn't so much decapitate her. He more smashed her skull to bits and took her head off with blunt force trauma. Which sounds pretty bad. I mean, I think given the opportunity, well, no. If I was in this situation and they're like, "Hey, we're going to kill you," probably going to be like, "Hey, just make sure it's sharp and make it quick, please." Maybe pull the old Italian mafia thing, just not in the face, so that my mother can have an open casket. Anyway, so imagine being the ye old janitor and having to clean up old lady blood, brains, hair, and all the other associated bodily fluids that come when someone's destroyed like that. That poor guy. He just goes from digging latrines to scrubbing Campbell's chunky old lady sauce off the floor. Not great. Not great. So here's some more royal. Mary, Queen of Scots, kind of a big name, is born December 8th, 1542. She was the only legitimate child that survived until adulthood of King James V of Scotland. She was 6 days old when James died, and she became the ruler of Scotland. I'm assuming there was probably a regent of some sort actually calling the shots, because can't imagine less than a week old is going to be real good on the policy level. But then again, we have people in this country that are 150 years old that are also not good on the policy level. But, I memean, some of them would have been like, "Hey, a 6-day-old sounds pretty awesome." I want to just release the list. It'll bring down the whole system. Well, if that's what it takes, then yeah, let's do that. Start feeding these people into wood chippers, or genitals first to hungry animals would be pretty cool too. Anyway, in 1558, at the age of 16, she was married off to Dauphin of France, which when I first read that, I thought it said dolphin, and I typed this, and I know it's not dolphin, but I wanted to call him Dauphin of France. Couldn't. Oh man, a dolphin with one of those powdered wigs and one of those gay ruffled neck collars is so funny. Oh. So she marries this guy, which makes her the Queen Regent of France, and that lasted from 1559 up until 1560 when Dauphin died. And she returns back to Scotland and married a half-cousin, Henry Stuart, Lord of Darnley, and they would then have a son, James, in 1566. I'm sure he's got all the right chromosomes and fingers and all that stuff. I mean, I guess half cousin. It's gross, but it's not like, mutant fish baby gross. Don't have sex with your cousins. I feel like feel like I'm digging myself a hole here. If you've met them at a family reunion, don't touch their genitals. There you go. Perfect. Okay. Walked that back pretty well. In 1567, an explosion rocked the Darnley residence, and the Lord was found murdered in the garden. Not associated. He was not killed by the explosion. Most people believe that James Hepburn, the 4th Earl of Bothwell, was the driving force behind the bombing and the murder. He was acquitted of the charges and then, strangely, coincidentally maybe, who knows, marries Mary within a month. How convenient. A grieving widow, and man there just benefit of the doubt. Maybe she wasn't involved. Maybe he was just, being a friend and, helping her through her grief with things. Or maybe they were already doing things and she's like, hey, you're better at, that thing than my husband is. Maybe we should get rid of him. Oh, God. Just couldn't imagine the smell of consummating at this period in time. Oh, would have smelled really bad. God, just, ugh. I've showered once this month. I'm doing pretty good for myself. On August 11th, 1586, she was arrested in connection to the Babington plot, which is no big deal. It was just a plan to assassinate Queen Elizabeth I, who was a Protestant, and put Mary on the throne as a Catholic, which the English are not super cool with. I could talk about some Irish fellas that would agree with me that, the English and Protestants were not the best idea for the British Isles. Elizabeth is a little pissed off that her cousin would want to, kill her and take her place. So Mary is hauled off to a Forthinghay Castle. That place has got a monocle on it. During the trial, she declared her innocence repeatedly, saying, quote, "Look to your consciences and remember that the theater of the whole world is wider than the kingdom of England." Then she was sentenced to life in prison. And unfortunately for her, that would be a very short life sentence. 4 days after she was sentenced, guards came to her cell on February 7th, 1587. She spent her final hours sorting her affairs and praying when the knocking came on the cell door. She walked to the freshly constructed scaffold and up the stairs, because this is royalty. We're not just going to use the regular old smashing your head off gallows or scaffold or whatever. We have fancy ones. This is made out of nice wood. We didn't go to Home Depot and buy all the crooked stuff and just slap together some ramshackle, execution platform. When she arrived at the top of the stairs, she would be forced onto her knees on a kneeling cushion, which I'm assuming if you were a regular person, you weren't getting that. The executioner asked for her forgiveness, which was common when executing a noble. And she says, quote, "I forgive you with all my heart, for now I hope you shall make an end to all my troubles." Her handmaids helped her remove her outer layers to reveal a crimson-brown petticoat, which was a common color for such a garment in cases like this. It really brings to mind that scene in Deadpool with this guy wears brown pants. And that's because the peasants witnessing this execution would try to tear pieces of clothing off as a keepsake, which is weird by today's standards. But having trophies for stuff like that, kind of normal back then. She's blindfolded and helped to the kneeling cushion, and her head was placed on the block. Her last words were, quote, "Thanks, editor." One executioner held her in place as the other raised the axe. So, I'm not sure if these guys have like, not like an employee handbook on how to execute people. But they potentially would have learned him and like, we had one that flipped and flopped around and that was really hard. So we're going to have somebody just like sit on her back or something. You just have this like giant chunk looking dude in a hood and then a smaller guy just like sitting on her back like pony rides, just holding her down. Whee! Then just off goes her head. So since she's on this episode, this obviously didn't go how it was planned. He brings the blade down onto the back of her neck, so she is still alive after the first shot. So he raises the axe again and slams it back down, at which time one of the onlookers said, quote, "Mary made a very small noise." Not sure what a small noise would sound like when you're getting a giant axe slammed into the back of your spinal cord, but whatever. At this point, her head was still attached by only a small gristle, according to another witness. After completely removing her head, the executioner raised her head and yelled, quote, "God save the Queen." As the crowd looked on, her head fell to the floor, with the executioner still clutching her wig. That's a little embarrassing, right? But it gets way weirder than that. The strangest part, when the executioner picked up her corpse, they noticed a rustling in her dress. They watched in, I'm guessing, mixed horror and curiosity as a tiny dog crept out from under her dress. They tried to get the dog to leave, but it just stayed in the puddle of her blood, distraught at the loss. So it's kind of like Fry's dog in Futurama, which is honestly still one of the saddest moments in TV history. Because he left, and then the dog was just like, he'll come back. Just laid there forever. So we're not talking just about the people that were executed. I've got a couple of people on here that did the executing. Not very well in some cases. And sometimes intentionally not very well. Jack Ketch, John Ketch, Richard Jaquette, whatever you want to call him. I like Dick Jacket. I think that's pretty cool. He would become the most prolific headsman in the history of the British Empire. So that's saying something, considering how big the British Empire was and how killy they got at times. And some of the more interesting ones I talked about over in the torture methods episode, which was pretty early on, actually. I might have to, I could probably go and like update some more of that stuff. But like they used to like, one of the ones they used in India was tying people to cannons and exploding them. But I mean, that's obviously not killing somebody with an axe, which is what this guy did, which is way different. It's way less brutal, right? So there's no record of his birth or hatching or summoning or whatever drew him forth to Earth. He would become the leading executioner in London in 1663. But like most other men before him in his profession, he spent much of his childhood as a street urchin and on ye old radar of the authorities. And he did end up spending some time in the Marshalsea prison. This prison was in operation starting in the year 1373 and closed in 1842. Oh boy, quick math here. So to put that into perspective, that's like 219 years longer than the United States has been an actual country. That's a long time. That's a very long time to have a prison open and active. And it also kind of makes you wonder if there was any upgrades done in that period of time, or if you got arrested in like 1820 and you're just still being thrown in a dungeon that was open in like 1375. You know, we were killing Normans in this thing a couple years ago, and all of a sudden, the first record of him as an executioner came via a woodcut from 1678 when he took his axe to the block for Edward Coleman, who had been accused of treason. He stays pretty busy for a couple years until 1682, when he went on strike. bad joke. Sorry. He held out and got paid and would end up going back to work. They had to come up with a collective bargaining agreement for executioners. I'm not going to work for the league minimum. I'm good at my job and I know what I'm worth. I want a big contract, 7 years, about $700 billion or whatever Shohei Ohtani's getting, even though he probably was doing illegal gambling and whatnot. But that's okay because he can play both ways. He's a good pitcher and he's a good batter. So it's totally fine. And also because, he plays for the Dodgers, he's untouchable. But Pete Rose can't go into the Hall of Fame, even though he's betting on his own team to win and not throwing games. But I digress. Anyway, he's such a good guy that he would also accept bribes and make money selling pieces and parts of the executed. Like actual parts, not just clothing. There were some stories that the rope used to either hang the condemned or lead them to their death site was being sold for $1 an inch, which is pretty good money considering it's rope. It's rope. And he's getting $1 an inch. It's pretty good, considering I don't know how much he was making per head, I guess. But that'd probably be like the equivalent of getting like, a $50 tip at work. Like, oh, here's a 50. That was really good. Speaking on the bribery part, most of the bribes came from those who were about to be executed. They would try to pay him off to make it as quick and painless as possible. The scary part is, like, at this point when they hung someone, it wasn't the way that we think of now, where it's like the short drop method, where it's just like you get the noose around the neck. I'm not going to go into detail on where you're supposed to place the noose, just in case anybody has ideas. But if you're thinking about that, talk to somebody. Fucking seriously. Don't do that. Get help if you're thinking that that's a good idea. Sorry to break off into like a suicide awareness thing there. But anyway, this isn't like that where it would be like, noose, trapdoor, you're gone. This was more akin to like a lynching, and it would take up to 45 minutes. And if you're not familiar with what lynching is, it's you put the rope around the neck, you throw it up over, in this case, probably like a lamppost of some sort, and you just haul up on the other end until they come up off the ground and they just strangle instead of breaking the neck like a more humane hanging would be. But this guy decided how long it would take for you to die by hanging. Because like if you gave him a good bribe, he'd probably get you up there and like maybe drop the rope and grab it, like as you're falling, grab it and yank back and try to, I don't know, maybe break your neck or something. One of the most notable executions was that of One of the most notable executions was that of Lord William Russell in 1863, who was convicted for his role in the Rye House plot to kill King Charles II. The word spread that it was botched because Ketch was not very good at his job. Other rumors were spread that he was bribed to make it even more painful than it needed to be. After the first stroke of the axe, Russell turned his head. So think about that for a second. This guy just slammed an axe into the back of your neck, and somehow you went, hey, how? Actually, what he said was, quote, "You dog, did I give you 10 guineas to use me so inhumanely?" And then it took another 3 blows to manually separate his head from his body. So yeah, that's pretty not great. I gave you money to do this right. Yeah, but now you're being a bitch about it. You're running your mouth, and now I'm going to make it worse. His next big one was 1865 when the Duke of Monmouth knelt in front of Ketch. And keep in mind, he's been executing people professionally for over 20 years at this point. He raises the axe and swings down into the back of the Duke's neck. Many people said that they heard Monmouth say, "Too dull." And then Ketch swung 4 more times before he had to finish the job with a knife. The execution was so gruesome and disturbing that Jack Ketch had to make his escape with military guards. He would then go on to die in 1686, and for the next couple hundred years, his name would be given to a series of different things like Ketch's Kitchen, which was the nickname for the room in the Newgate prison where the limbs of those tried for high treason would be boiled. And for a while, they took to calling nooses Jack Ketch's necklace. So, man, that guy was a real piece of crap, like, he sucks. Now, let's get on to another funny one. Funny, sad, however you want to look at it. I'm just here to deliver the facts, so you can form your own opinion on how you feel about this. Joseph Samuel was convicted of robbery in 1795. He was then transported to the world's largest prison, Australia, as part of a group of 297 convicts. Australia is not a prison anymore, I guess. But, I mean, it was. I have an Australian listener. Actually, I've got 2 Australian listeners. So, let's see what you guys think of that. And don't think I've forgotten about you. I'm going to get around to your Robin Hood next season. I promise. It's going to be so much fun. Robin Hood, John Dillinger, whatever you want to call him. He had excellent hair and a really sweet mustache. The early years of the Australian penal colony were pretty wild. They basically just turned these guys loose in small settlements, and the guards didn't really worry too much about anybody getting away. Because if they did, they kind of figured that you'd have that Jurassic Park moment, life finds a way. But in this case, life is actually crocodiles and poisonous snakes and spiders the size of cocker spaniels that will kill and eat you. But this turd escaped with a gang, and they robbed the house of a wealthy woman, and in the getaway, they killed a policeman that was guarding the house. So this woman had so much money that she had a private police officer to guard her house. So the gang is then hunted down and captured and put on trial. The other gang members were acquitted due to lack of evidence, but because the woman that owned the house pointed the finger at Samuel as the culprit, he's convicted and sentenced to death by hanging. September 26th, 1803, he was tossed into a cart and taken to the cartoonishly named Parramatta, where a crowd of hundreds had gathered. In Australia, I'm not picking on you. I like you guys. Steve Irwin is literally the best human being that's ever existed. And let's be real, I'm a dad. I've seen every episode of Bluey about 10 times. It's a fantastic show. And also, like, one of my recent favorite TV series wouldn't be a thing if it weren't for, you guys, because pretty sure that, well, is he from New Zealand? Is he a Kiwi? I don't remember. Doesn't matter, I guess. But What We Do in the Shadows, like the movie, was really good, and that kind of spawned the TV show, which is also fantastic. The noose of hemp was placed over his head and tightened around his neck. And again, this is a different hanging method than what was still common, where instead of, like I just mentioned with Jack Ketch, where it was a lynching, or you have a trapdoor, short stop, sudden, short drop, sudden stop, neck break. This was, I think they called this the cart method, where they'd put you in a cart, and obviously the noose is tied to something underneath the cart, like above the cart. And then they get the cart to move like real quickly to drop you out the back of it and try to break your neck. But more often than not, it didn't break the neck. You just kind of sway there and strangulate for however long it takes. I know Irma Grease was like 18 minutes and just worth it. That woman sucked. Anyway, the rope that they used was rated for 1,000 pounds for 5 minutes without breaking. The man that was hanged with Samuel died after just a couple of minutes, but Samuel was lucky. His rope was slightly too long, and he fell and sprained his ankle when he landed on his feet. So the hangman fitted him for another brand new, fresh hemp noose. And they force him back up onto the cart. Cart takes off again, and he falls from the cart. This time, when he fell, the noose slipped off, and he landed pretty hard, like basically face first on the ground. So, hey, we're 0 for 2. But executions, much like baseball, are a game of statistics. You know, you can go 1 for 3 at the plate. As long as it's a good 1 for 3, that's all that matters. You know, you can strike out twice, but if you hit a grand slam that, you know, walks it off in the bottom of the 11th inning, 1 for 3 is pretty good. He's again fitted with a noose and tossed into the back of the cart. Cart is driven out from under him again, and this time the rope snapped. As you can imagine, the crowd that is gathered to watch a public execution and they don't get one are a little upset. And they're now calling for him to be freed, which is not what you were expecting me to say, was it? You're probably like, thinking these guys are like, just tie the rope around his neck, tie it to the horse, slap the horse. Well, we'll get him that way. No. A policeman that was doing security for the event went to get the governor. When the two returned, they inspected the rope of the dead man, and they inspected all the ropes that were used on Samuel and found that none of them had been tampered with. There was nothing really wrong with any of them. And then the governor kind of decided, like, this is probably a sign that since we've tried this 3 times, we should show him a little bit of mercy. So the town doctor treated his sprained ankle, and he was sent to prison for the rest of his life. So that one didn't end the way that it could have. It was more just like a couple of really, really sore ankles and maybe a black eye or two, because he did fall right on his face on one attempt. But now here's one that I don't feel bad for. I don't know where you personally, as a listener, fall with capital punishment. I think that for some things, I'm okay with it, but for others, I'm not, you know? And I think that you need to have 1,000,000,000% proof that this person is actually guilty of what they're being tried for if we're going to kill them for it. Like, do I think somebody should be in prison for the rest of their life because they got caught with like 4 pounds of weed? No, absolutely not. That is retarded in the most scientific term used for that word. But in this guy's case, I would have executed him personally with my bare hands. I wouldn't have given him the opportunity to go through what he went through. I would have more than gladly beaten this guy to death with a shovel. Jimmy Lee Gray was convicted for the murder of 3-year-old Doressa Jean Scales in 1976. 3 years old. God. He kidnapped her and raped her repeatedly. Now, the part of this story, other than the act of hurting this kid, that bothers me the most is he was out on parole after serving 7 years of a 20-year sentence for the murder of Elda Prince, who was a girl that he was dating at the time of her death in Parker, Arizona. So for the murder of Scales in Mississippi, he was sentenced to death in the gas chamber in 1983. He would be the first person executed in Mississippi since 1976. So about 9 years. The day of his execution, he was led into the gas chamber and strapped into a chair, at which point in time, the curtain would come up so that the witnesses that were there could watch the execution. One of those witnesses was Dan Lowasser from the United Press International. The setup for the chamber was kind of different, where there's they have to secure the chair in place, right? So instead of, personally, if I was going to do this, right, I would have lag bolted the chair into the concrete floor, because you can do that. This gas chamber has an iron bar that runs that runs from the floor up into the ceiling, and the chair was basically just strapped to the iron bar. You can probably see where this is going a mile away. Before the execution, when he was being strapped in, Lowasser noticed that there is no head restraint on the chair. The room was filled with cyanide gas, or as our German friends would have called it, Zyklon B. And as the gas crept into his lungs, he starts thrashing as it's killing the cells in his lungs, heart, and brain. So the way that works is, if I remember correctly from seeing pictures, you have the chair that they sit in, and then underneath, like attached to the bottom of the seat part, there's a little tray that has like solution in it. Don't make that joke. With the pellet, the cyanide pellet on a platform above the solution, where it's like remotely dropped in after the room is sealed. No. And then it like dissolves in the solution, which creates the gas, which is the same thing that happens if you accidentally mix like ammonia and bleach, where you commit a World War I war crime in your house while you're trying to clean. So he's in this chair and he's thrashing all around, right? And he's slamming the back of his head against the pole repeatedly. He ends up slamming his head against this pole so many times that it knocked him out, and then he eventually would succumb to the gas while he was unconscious. Lowasser said, quote, Jimmy Lee Gray died banging his head against a steel pole in the gas chamber while reporters counted his moans. Oh, no. Anyway, Jesse Tafaro killed a 9-year veteran of the Florida Highway Patrol, a man named Philip Black, and an Ontario provincial police officer, Donald Irwin, who was visiting his friend, Officer Black. Tafaro, his wife, and kids were passengers in the vehicle when the murder happened. Another man named Walter Rhodes was driving the vehicle. So to kind of set the scene here, everybody in the scumbag's car, I don't know that everybody in the car is a scumbag, but they're scumbags in the car, meaning that it's the scumbag car, right? So everybody in this car is sleeping when Officer Black approaches the vehicle to see if everybody's okay. He looks through the window and sees a gun on the floor. And when Tafaro and Rhodes exited the car, because he's like, hey, you can't be here and you can't have a gun in the car. According to Rhodes, Tafaro grabbed the gun and shot both officers, and then they took the police car to get rid of it. Eventually, after dumping the police car, the whole crew was stopped at a roadblock and taken into custody. Since this happened in the late 80s in Florida, Tafaro's days are numbered, and he had a date with Old Sparky. Old Sparky, if there was a Lifetime Achievement Award for state-sponsored killing people, Old Sparky would have gotten it by now. On the day of his execution, he was strapped into the chair. His shaved head was pressed into the skull cap, and a sponge was placed between his scalp and the cap, which is all kind of like part of standard operating procedures for deep frying a human. So basically, the reason they do this is because, so to be Bill Nye the Science Guy for a second, water helps conduct electricity. And so does metal. And when you touch metal to electricity while you're on a ladder, that's not fun. Ask me how I know. So the reason that they want more conductivity is so that they can kill you faster. That is, if the correct sponge is being used. The facility had run out of the natural sea sponges that they were using that were a more common use for this. And the staff member in charge of getting the sponge, he's like, well, we don't have any more of those. So he just grabbed a synthetic sponge, which is different in a very interesting way. This causes the electric chair to malfunction. The process required 3 jolts, and on the third jolt, 6-inch high flames shot out from under the cap and partially burned him. The whole process took about 7 minutes to electrocute this man to death. One of the inmates claimed that the chair had been tampered with to cause more pain than necessary due to him killing an officer of the law, where other inmates claimed that, less conspiratorially, that they could smell burning flesh weeks later from their cells that were in the same area as the electric chair. Oh, and the best part is, not too long after Tefero was executed, Rhodes recanted his statement and took full blame for killing the officers and said, I was the one that actually pulled the trigger. So, I don't know if maybe he was like, well, they're going to kill me too. Maybe if I just come clean, they'll give me a good sponge or just, I don't know, shoot me or something. But I'm having fun talking about the electric chair, so let's keep it up. Alan Lee Davis in Jacksonville, Florida, killed 3 people May 11th of 1982. Nancy Wheeler, who was 3 months pregnant, and her 2 daughters, Christina, 10, and Catherine, 5, were both shot multiple times. Technically, he could be charged for 4 homicides. But that's getting into politics and splitting hairs, and, let's not do that. We're having fun talking about people getting executed. So he shot all 3 of these guys multiple times. He shot all 3 of these women multiple times. Well, women and 2 girls. And after Nancy was shot, he hit her in the face 25 times with the .357 that he used. And when the police got there, they said that she was, quote, unrecognizable as human. That's how badly he beat her face in. Look up ballistic testing of a .357 Magnum, and then imagine what that would do. No, don't imagine what that would do to a small child, because it's horrible. But a .357 is a large round. Let's put it that way. So this piece of shit was marched to the chair July 8th, 1999. The witnesses said during and after the execution period, blood sprayed from his nose like a faucet. Officials claimed that it was a nosebleed, but due to all that, he would be the last batch of extra crispy fried person that Florida would make. Fun fact, his last meal was lobster tail, fried potatoes, half a pound of shrimp, 6 ounces of fried clams, half a loaf of garlic bread, and a 32-ounce A&W root beer. I mean, it's a pretty good dinner, The only thing, I'm reading this again. The only thing I think I would change is I would swap the lobster tail for crab legs. Yeah, I think, half a pound of shrimp, I could do that. Fried clams, yeah, that's good. Half a loaf of garlic bread, yeah. It depends, are you cutting it half a loaf like the long way or in the middle? And I can always cook with a root beer. A&W is not my jam. I'm a Barks guy, for future reference if I ever have to have my final meal. But yeah, that would. You know what? Hey, what the hell? If you're hearing this, comment on this episode on Spotify or YouTube, and what's your last meal? Let's hear it. That's not that'd be fun. Let's see. I'd want to go with something classic. I'm going to remember that this is my last meal. I'm going to go with I want some shepherd's pie. I want good shepherd's pie though. Want some Spanish rice. That's always good too. Um, like a couple of good slices of like a really crusty bread, like from a bakery that's not the dog you at the grocery store that's got like 1,000 ingredients in it. Well, it's just like a big chunk of like really good bread with some butter and then peanut butter on it. Maybe throw some honey on there too, if good behavior and whatnot. And then man, just a bucket of strawberry ice cream to wash it all down. And a couple of Cokes, like regular Cokes, that'd be good. Yeah. That's pretty classic. I think that's not bad. I think I could go to the I get, I think I could go and face the wall happy after a meal like that. So, anyway, let's talk about another executioner. And this guy was our and this guy had our quote for the beginning of the episode. John C. Woods was born in Wichita, Kansas, June 5th, 1911. He joined the Conservation Corps in 1933, but went AWOL for 6 days for refusing to work and then was dishonorably discharged shortly afterwards. Dishonorable discharge or not, World War II kicked off and we need bodies and uniforms, and Uncle Sam took all 5'4", 130 pounds of John C. Woods. This part is crazy because when I'm telling you that this guy is an executioner in the military, you're not going to really expect this route. March 30th, 1944, he was assigned to Company B, 37th Engineering Combat Battalion, 5th Engineer Special Brigade. There is no report that he went AWOL or missing or anything like that with this group, which means this guy took part in the invasion of Omaha Beach on June 6th, 1944. He was on the beach at Normandy. You'd think that if they had just brought this guy in to be an executioner, they would have just done so. And like, okay, well, we'll get you on a plane from England to wherever. But that's not the case. He had to earn the job. He applied for and was accepted into the 2913th Disciplinary Training Center in October of 1944 and trained as a hangman. There is every possibility that he lied his ass off to get this job, and that's probably so that he didn't have to return to combat. Also, around this time, he went from the rank of private to master sergeant. So between the end of 1944 and the beginning months of 1945, he has hung a bare minimum of 34 U.S. soldiers in France for insubordination or abandonment of post. So this guy's job took him from an E1 as a private to an E8 as a master sergeant, which is pretty impressive. There's a lot of dudes that are in the military for 15, 20 years that don't make it that far. Anyway, he would also assist in the hanging of 3 other soldiers. Either way, of the 37 he took part in, 11 of them were completely bungled in one way or another. June 29th, 1945, he finally started hanging Germans. He hung 3 for the murder of Lieutenant Lester Roos. Then November 10th, he hanged 5 more Germans involved in the Russelheim massacre, which was pretty not good. You don't just have an event and get the word massacre attached to it and have it just be lollipops and blowjobs. It's not good. But now, his big moment, like he's been training all his year for this. November 20th, 1945, his starring role at the Nuremberg trials begins. 12 scumbags were condemned to die for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Shocking. Hermann Göring, the leader of the Nazi Party, who was tried in absentia, was later found dead by suicide. Joachim von Ribbentrop, which That name will come up again in a future episode. He's the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Wilhelm Keitel, Field Marshal of the Wehrmacht. So he is the leader, the highest ranking member of the Wehrmacht, which the Wehrmacht was just the standard German army. That's the part where I usually remind people that not everybody that was in the German army were Nazis. A lot of these guys were drafted or went to fight voluntarily for their country without knowing about all of the terrible that the SS was doing. But anyway, he's going to hang some of them. Ernst Kaltenbrunner, who's the chief of Reich Security. Alfred Ernst Rosenberg, head of the Office of Foreign Affairs. Hans Frank, head of the Nazi government in Poland. Wilhelm Frick, Reich Minister of the Interior. Julius Streichner, member of the Reichstag. Fritz Saukel, head of the Labor Department. Alfred Jodl, chief of operations for the Wehrmacht. Arthur Seyss-Inquart, who's the Chancellor of Austria during the later days of the war. Also, most of these guys are like super high-ranking members in the SS, so I'm okay with them dying. Now, we talked about a couple of women earlier this season. One of them was executed at Nuremberg. I don't know if he did it, but God, I hope he did, because it would have been so much better if he had hung Irma Grease. He would have made her life, death miserable. So now let's get to the fun part. Our buddy Woods would be the one carrying out all of these hangings. The U.S. Army, to this day, still stands behind their stance of all of these errors were exactly that, errors. They were not done intentionally. Wink. Woods decided to use the standard drop method of hanging instead of the long drop. Long drop has a much better success rate for neck breaks, but also has the possibility of just straight up ripping your head off. Like the fat guy that was part of Saddam Hussein's cabinet, that they miscalculated his weight when they hung him and ripped his head off with like a big chunk of his spinal column, like a Mortal Kombat fatality. I want to say that was early days of YouTube that I saw that, back when YouTube was cool. You guys are still cool. Don't take my video down, please. The standard drop didn't break the neck as often. It would more likely than not cause the person to just strangle. But since these are like Nazis, like actual Nazis, who really cares? Let them suffer. Hell with them. Could have done this to some of the higher ups in communist Russia too, and I'd have had I would have been just as neutral about it. Some notable stories from here were Field Marshal Keitel, who, when the door dropped from under him, his feet swung and he gargled for 28 minutes until he finally died. A reporter for the London Star that was witness to the execution said, quote, "The nooses were not tied correctly. As a result, some of the men smashed their heads and faces on the platform as they dropped. One man had his face hit so hard it knocked his teeth out of his head." Whoops. Was I know the golden rule is to, measure twice and cut once, but mistakes happen. And we'll try to rectify it in the future. Like the next time we have to kill a bunch of war criminals, we'll make sure we get it right then. The last one to die was Stricker. This was also witnessed by a reporter, this time from the International News Service, which I think went on to become like the AP, I believe. He said, quote, "When the rope snapped taut with the body swinging wildly, groans could be heard from within the concealed interior of the scaffold." So basically, the way they had these set up was you have your scaffold with your drop platform, and it's hollow underneath there, obviously. But instead of building walls, they just put like black curtains up so that you couldn't see the person kicking and thrashing around. But they also had to be able to get under there to make sure that they were dead. So that quote continues, "Finally, the hangman who had descended from the gallows platform lifted the black canvas curtain and went inside. Something happened that put a stop to the groans and brought the rope to a standstill. After it was over, I was not in the mood to ask what he did, but I assumed that he grabbed the swinging body and pulled down on it. We were all of the opinion that Stricker had strangled. Again, don't really feel all that bad. When all was said and done, Wood said, quote, 10 men in 103 minutes. That's fast work. That quote continued, never, I never, I never saw a hanging go off any better. We have another quote here that we'll end this section on. Quote, I hanged those 10 Nazis and I'm proud of it. I wasn't nervous. Fellow can't afford to have nerves in this business. I want to put in a good word for those GIs who helped me. They all did swell. I'm trying to get them a promotion. The way I look at this hanging job, somebody has to do it. I got into it kind of by accident years ago in the States. So, what you mean by that when you say that? Kansas in the early 1900s. I wonder if they were lynching black people. Probably. In total, he would execute 92 men in his career. That's outside professionally, not at the amateur level, because we don't know how many he was involved in there. He stayed in the army until his death in July 21st, 1950, when he himself was executed accidentally when he was trying to repair a lighting set and he was electrocuted. So that's that was some botched executions and the fellas that botched him. Or did they? In some cases, who knows? Maybe they intentionally fucked him up. You guys seem to like the episodes where it's like I just have a topic and then there's a bunch of stuff like different little side pieces in it. So I wanted to do another one of those. They're fun. But yeah. And we're gonna have a very similar episode next week with less executions, I guess. There's still people dying. But I mean, it's history and it's my show, and that's kind of a common theme here is talk about people dying in history because it's kind of a thing that happens pretty frequently. But anyway, until then, you should head over to Patreon, patreon.com/1159 media. $5 a month gets you early access to History Goon. It gets you early access and backdoor access to Guestnicity with Luther. Gets you early access and backdoor access to the Never Daily with Sam. And I believe it's his sister that's on there now too. She did a super fascinating topic a couple of weeks ago. Like, I'm a member, right? So she was talking about, oh my goodness, I can't even remember what it was called. But she got like super in depth about this topic. And she's like, nobody's commenting on anything anymore. People are leaving. We're like, no. We're listening. Keep talking. Keep telling this because it's fascinating. And you also get early access to 911 calls with the operator, who at this point in time, you would have seen the last episode where Sam was on there. I still have to get Op on here sometime because he seems pretty cool. But yeah, I made as of the time of recording this, I posted on Facebook on the page, which if you're not in the group, you should be, because we're just like slinging history memes and being dorks. It's fun. I made a post that I've got the rest of season 2 mapped out. I just have to have time to write, record, edit, and do like post-production stuff. So if anybody knows how I can make extra time, this would be a hell of a lot easier to do if I could do this full time and get paid for it and not have to work my regular job too. But anyway, until I can do that, if you want to support the show, you want to support me directly, I have a Ko-Fi. It's ko-fi.com patreon.com/historygoonpod. Any donation you make there goes directly to me as the creator. Very much appreciated. If you want to throw me a couple of bucks, that's awesome. If you don't, that's also awesome. But if you don't want to pay me, which, I mean, I don't want to pay me, spread the word. Tell people you work with. Tell friends. Tell people you don't particularly like that there's some dickhead with a history podcast that's kind of funny. You know, and he's also got a YouTube channel, youtube.com whatever, search History Goon Podcast and you'll find me, where you can watch the video and see my super cool backdrop that is fantastic. And I just noticed that my son has moved Snorlax onto my rifle, which is fantastic. But until we meet again, we're all going to die someday. So go out and do some goon shit and leave a mark on the world. Maybe not like some of these guys, though. Okay, love you. Bye.